I'm Lucien Steil. I'm an architect from Luxembourg, teaching at the University of Notre Dame and participating in the Iberian Summer School for 6 years already, on 10, in various places, Seville, Madrid, Amaiur in the Basque Country, Pico on the Azores, and then here in this wonderful place in Ronda. And I'm in reality an accidental teacher. I came into teaching by serendipity, I would say. I never thought I would be a teacher because I was a practicing architect, and I studied architecture really to go into building a better world, and I was always interested in traditional architecture, vernacular architecture. And then when I came and had an opportunity to teach, I really thought that that was my primary vocation, engaging with students and kind of working out patterns and strategies for a more sustainable, a more human, and a more convivial future. I think the summer school is a rare occasion, a rare opportunity for the students to first meet people from various places of the planet, coming from different schools with different backgrounds, social, ethnic, religious, but all have a common, I would say, vision, all an ideal of places which refer back to the feelings, emotions, and cultures of the place, which kind of respect the materials, the habits, the people, and also which are really interested in a joyful practice of craftsmanship. So building by hands, drawing, exploring the sensuousness, the spirituality, the materiality, the social and ethical, moral values which the built environment allows us to kind of embrace and to enjoy. And then also I think one thing also which is important, and I've seen this with many students coming from schools where the education is very top-down, where people are kind of regimented to think in very linear ways and look only at one option, looking at one ideology, and having the opportunity to really explore with their own kind of emotional and cultural background a way which I would say the natural way of building, the way buildings have always been done, in collaboration with others, in respect of a given environment, a given program, and also allow their imagination to flourish with the very immediate and natural constraints which are acceptable, which are not imposed. Just understanding that people, they need comfort, people kind of really need aesthetical comfort, moral comfort, climatical comfort. And also what I find so interesting is this possibility, this experience that between the dialectics that learning and teaching. So seeing that also the professors are students and that the students are also professors. So that is a two-way relationship. So we learn from the participants a lot, and we kind of learn and we kind of are marveled by the way they discover the world and bring newness to our own kind of experiences. So many of us have had a kind of experience maybe 30, 40, sometimes 50 years, and then we have students who have in their 20s and they suddenly open windows on new things we have never thought about. So this really pleasure of discovery, of working together. I think what's really fabulous is like the first intergeneration. So this year we have like people are more or less in a similar age group. We have some high school students, which is fantastic. Then older, and I think it really is very important, because if we want to create new generations of builders, craftsmen and architects, we have to start early. When you know that Renaissance architects, they started when they were 12. They did craftsmanship, they did already look into building crafts and then developed over time to very proficient craftsmen and architects and artists. So the idea, this fact that we have high school students who are very motivated, which is also an encouraging sign, because I hear often people saying these young generations, they are, you know, they're only on their phones and on their on the social media, which is it's a really stupid assertion, because it's not true, because we see many people, young people at 15 or 16, very engaged for the environment. We have seen this with Greta Thunberg, for example, incredibly young, very engaged for peace, for the environment, for a better world. And also some of our students, they are kind of very engaged and from very young on for building a better world. So it's absolutely fantastic. But we had also, we have, I think this year we have mostly, they're mostly architects, very few are not architects, but we had also years where we had, for example, people who are older, I would say double of the age. And I remember last year we had one student and she was close to 50 and she was very concerned. And then we told her, don't worry, you know, nobody will notice. Because it's just the group embraces easily and nobody really makes a difference. So the age gap is completely irrelevant and people just kind of get along, because there's a cultural harmony, there's a cultural and there's a common vision, there's a common ground which makes the background, I wouldn't say irrelevant, the background becomes another opportunity. So people, when they come from different backgrounds, they bring different experiences. For example, last year this older student who didn't look old at all, it was the first time she traveled out of the United States. And so she was kind of a little bit anxious, but then there was a younger student, half of her age, who helped to navigate. And she came, a student from China, but who was more traveled, helped her to navigate in Portugal. And I think that was so fantastic. And also this year, people already the first day kind of calling each other, having a drink together, and then one of the students who is a high school student said, let's go and sketch. So just this self-organization and, you know, different experience, different groups, then with a high degree of self-motivation, self-organization, creating an incredible dynamics, an incredible energy, which goes through the whole studio. As you have seen, it goes through the whole studio. People kind of working together. They have never met each other in life before, suddenly working together. After 2 days, they're friends, and then things kind of really go very productively, very smoothly. And you know, everybody's kind of really learning and taking inspiration from others. I also seen that the learning curve is very steep, so people who have been very tentative in their drawings in the first day, suddenly bang, the drawings get really improving very radically. And then people who they were saying, oh, my English is not so good, suddenly they speak fluent English after 1 week. So so it really shows that learning is it's fun, and learning in a social context becomes very fast. You know, it's very efficient. Yeah, it's a very good model. And I think that it's a good model because it's so opposed to the academy, which is has become a very rigid and very regimented way, and it probably has to be like that, but sometimes it then lacks out on the emotional needs of students, because it's so an abstract system. So often people ignore the needs, they ignore the curiosity of students, they ignore the diversity of students, they also ignore the plurality of students. So the students becomes like a standardized thing. It becomes an object, you know, and every student is has to be fitting into this category. Whereas I think here there is a kind of acknowledgement that everybody is different. Everybody has different, and that the ideas from everybody are valuable, are important. So listening to everybody, and then also not being too concerned about accreditation, about who is the best, and grading. So we don't have grading, we don't have accreditation. So everybody just gives the best of himself, and every work I've seen of every student has the highest level. I always say that beauty is like love. You don't have to explain to people what love is, because everybody knows what it is. And everybody knows when there's no love, and everybody knows when there's love, and without having any scientific explanation. And often when you go into scientific explanation, and that happens also with beauty, people start to talk about, okay, they do like scanning your brain, and when something is beauty, you see one part of the brain starts to flimmer, or and then they have like machines, they look at your eye movement, and they say when the eye moves this way, because they see beauty, because symmetry and everything. I'm very kind of suspicious of that thing. I'm very suspicious in defining beauty with machines and tools, and trying then to freeze beauty in predefined patterns. And I'm sure that a lot of in these attempts, it has value. It has value because, especially when you see modern art, where often we see things which are pretty ugly and which are presented in museums, and maybe we need some tools to convince the people who do it that even artificial intelligence doesn't agree with what they do, because now that happens now. You say you ask artificial intelligence to draw a beautiful building, and they draw a beautiful building, artificial. And when you ask the artificial to draw an ugly one, they draw an ugly one, which looks very much like a little bit what is built in many places of the world. But generally, I think that beauty is something you can talk about it, but beauty also the best example of beauty is when you kind of go to nature, and there are theories about architecture which talk about architecture being the imitation of nature. And you talk about the balance in nature, you look at the fractals of the leaves of a tree, the structures, and how things stand up and how things flourish. And then you have this also the relationship, the ecological systems where everything is kind of related to something else, and it lives in harmony with something else. And it's not a stable thing, so it can also change, but it changes, but then when something changes, other things adapts, and it always remains. So you see the seasons. So winter is beautiful, summer is beautiful, but it's completely different. And so the elements, they transform, and then they come back to their initial state. So I think that in architecture beauty, one thing which we have to learn again is to learn use natural materials, materials which are not toxic, which come from our environment, which come in a short range of where we live, like has been done in the past, rather than transporting things over thousands of kilometers and then processing it so that it becomes natural material, becomes an artificial material, and then building things which last only 20 or 25 years, and then changing the appearance following the various fashions which are short-lived. So learning to use the materials we have, and there's a lot of materials which are abundant. We have earth, we can use wood, depending on where we are. There are places where there's no wood, but there are branches, there's sand, we can do mud bricks. So most of the places in the world, there's enough materials to build with what is around. And then all the materials, they have also certain rules. The way, for example, we have seen pictures these last days where people have buildings in natural materials, but then suddenly we have huge openings where we know they cannot be bridged over with natural materials, so we know that there's either steel or reinforced concrete. So when we use the local materials, we also have to respect the natural tectonics, meaning that we can bridge a large opening maybe with an arch, but we cannot bridge a large opening with a horizontal lintel in a natural material. So maybe we can have a big trunk of tree, but there are places where this is not available. So we use a voussoir with bricks or an arch, and then we can do magnificent things. And I think beauty comes when you have, I think when you are in harmony with the environment, with the material, with the tectonics. The tectonics is in some way the poetry of construction. It's how the material wants to be used. The material tells you itself how it wants to be used, because you cannot use wood in certain areas, you cannot put wood in certain ways, you cannot use stone in certain ways, and you cannot use bricks. So yeah, every material has its own way how it wants to be used and how it wants to present its beauty. But then also, I think a very important thing is also geometry, and that's something we see in Islamic culture, for example. That's very important. Geometry is really the basis of everything, and also in Christian mythology, and I think also in Islamic mythology, the geometry is in some way it's like I wouldn't say a symbol, but also how the divine or how the cosmos or the God kind of manifests himself. You know, how we kind of, it's like the armature of the universe, and we see that, for example, the movements of the star, the proportions of and the mechanism of rotation of the Earth, the stars, and all the macrocosm, all the mathematical relationships and geometric relationships in the macrocosm correspond exactly to the relationships and proportions in the microcosm, even to the at the interior of our individual cells, or at the electrons and the microns and everything. So they all kind of rotate and interact with the same kind of metrics and proportions and at the larger scale. And I think that's something we really have to interiorize again. We have just to be aware of that and get away from looking at architecture as an abstract, detached thing from just the understanding of nature and understanding really of the foundations of life. It's a living thing. So buildings are living, they're breathing, and we see that when you talk about that, say, oh, our buildings breathing. Yeah, they are breathing because in order to keep the walls dry and to keep the mold out of the walls and to have a good inner atmosphere, fresh air, the walls have to be permeable. So if we add insulation, oil-derived plastics, styrofoam in between the external wall and the inner wall, we seal off the wall and the buildings are not breathing anymore. Then we need artificial ventilation, we need heat, we need air conditioning, everything. So we kind of create a complete artificial environment, which in some way kills the comfort, the really natural comfort we could achieve with just very simple, natural ways of building. Here in Ronda, we do this wonderful. Ronda is, I think, one of a larger place, beautiful, mostly very characterized by its relationship to an absolutely stunning, beautiful landscape, magnificent historical center. So what we're doing here, so we're kind of connecting a number of places which need attention. So we kind of transforming a parking lot in a new pedestrianized urban piece with a new market and piazza, smaller blocks and piazzetta and like a plaza, main plaza, and then improving an existing main square with better pavement and planting and kind of creating more more coherence, more architectural coherence. And then a number of missing teeth, filling in missing teeth, like ruins, building up ruins again, and then also kind of improving like abandoned pieces with ruins and kind of creating like some valuable new public space. And but overall kind of enriching and kind of increasing the coherence of the city, and also creating places of tourist interest out of the historical center. So giving the same attention to the new neighborhoods, which are a little bit with larger blocks, but which don't really have all this kind of potential and quality and artistic quality, also bringing this into the less sophisticated area, so that tourists, rather than clustering and hanging out only around the bridge and the historical center, they can also go and visit the new market area and some other parts of the city, and so also help dissipate or distribute a little bit the centers of touristical attraction a little bit on a larger territory, so just to kind of mitigate the negative impact of overall tourism.